Hello and welcome to HR Live. From our perspective, there's little doubt that throughout 2021 and 2022, workplaces have undergone a significant structural change. And of course, I'm referring to, at least from a HR and workplace relations perspective, the great work from home experiment that we now know as COVID-19. Today on HR Live, we're joined by On Demand HR Managing Director Clint Indrele, who's going to share his experience and insights on why, and most importantly, how businesses can either adapt or push back against this structural change in employee expectations. My name's Indrele. I'm the Operations Director of On Demand HR. And since 2010, we've been helping businesses of all sizes to navigate through Australia's complex industrial relations system. And it's really this practical experience that goes well beyond theory that allows us to offer advice and insights which balance risk on the one hand against the interest of the business on the other. HR Live is also a fantastic opportunity for you to put forward any questions around HR or workplace relations your business is facing. And if we can, of course, we'll try and answer them live on the stream. However, if there's a bit more to unpack, you pick the right session to listen in. Today, we've got a really special announcement of a new and free way in which you can engage with on-demand HR and access guidance regarding your day-to-day HR and workplace relations issues. So please keep watching to the end of the session. So with all of that out of the way, welcome again to HR Live, Clint Indrele.
Yeah, thanks very much, Andrew. Look, great to be here once again. And thank you for inviting me to this talk on workplace flexibility.
Fantastic. So kicking things off and getting into the detail now, I first wanted to ask you, do you agree with me that there's been what I consider anyway, a significant and permanent shift in employee expectations regarding workplace flexibility? Or do you think that now that we're in the back end to some degree of COVID, things will return to the way that they were done before?
Look, I think there has been a significant and permanent shift in this regard. And I think Australia's experience with this is probably different from other countries to the extent that I think Australia, unfortunately, have undertaken the longest periods of lockdowns in the world, or some of the longest in the world. I think Melbourne was the longest period in the world. And basically, I think what that's done is people have worked from home for the best part of 2 years, or a very large part of that 2 years. They've become familiar and accustomed to performing their duties and activities during that time, to a competent standard. And so now the question mark is, well, hang on a second, we've been doing this for 2 years. It was good enough for COVID times. Why isn't it good enough on an ongoing basis? And that's the pushback we're seeing from employees in relation to office return, is that, well, what's the justification for going back to the office? Other countries, different story. I mean, they had short lockdown periods. They were obviously returning to their offices much quicker. And it's really interesting. We've got a couple of clients that are across different borders, and what their employees expect in other countries are very different from what their employees expect in Australia. So I think that the challenge in Australia is the justification of the employer to return people to the office, and you really need a very good purpose. And I do think that this is here to stay. I think particularly in a competitive market, 3.5% unemployment, I think people's expectations around this, if they're not happy with the workplace flexibility they're getting from their current employer, they'll just find someone else who is going to offer them something better.
Yeah, the new thought that was going through my mind as you were speaking there, it's almost employees are saying, hey, throughout to their employers, hey, throughout COVID, we've been forced to change and adapt and work around in order for you to continue operating as a business. Now we're out of the COVID period. We're asking you to change and adapt to work with our new expectations. Why are you pushing back at us? It doesn't seem to make sense. You got something to add?
Yeah, no, look, most definitely. I think the onus has really flipped. I think that pre-2020, I think the onus was on the individual to demonstrate why they needed to work from home. Now I think the onus is on the employer to demonstrate why the employee needs to work from the office.
Yeah, That's a good summary. And in your view, does allowing employees workplace flexibility assist with some of the cost of living pressures, which is a very topical issue today that's associated with, obviously the inflation that we're experiencing? I've heard stories about employees that, are being asked to return to the office. So they're demanding further pay increases in order to cover both their commuting and also the time that it takes out of their other parts of their life.
Yeah, look, I think most definitely it does reduce not only the cost of going to work, but the time associated with going to work. I mean, yesterday is actually a great example. I've met up with a good friend of ours actually after work for a beer or two, and the one thing that was really interesting, it was first of all the time getting in to meet with him, the time leaving the CBD of Parramatta, which was crazy in terms of traffic, the costs associated with the parking, which wasn't too bad, but it was still a cost nonetheless. So you add up all of those things, and you think, well, there's a time cost there, there's a cost of running the vehicle, there's a cost of the parking. All of those things are certainly adding up, and for those who are being asked to return to the office more often than not, well, obviously a lot of those costs have increased in the past 6 to 12 months. So yes, I do think that there is, certainly some categories are feeling that more than others. And I think that's where, the workplace flexibility can reduce some of those costs. Having said that, I mean, obviously a lot of these people were traveling to work 5 days a week prior to 2020. So you could make an argument that they've also had a saving in that time, and now they're just being asked to bring back some of that cost. So look, the interesting arguments there on the cost side and on the time side of things.
It's interesting. I would almost flip the whole conversation the other way around. Think about if you're an employer who is willing to offer workplace flexibility, you might be able to secure, attract, steal other people's or your competitors' employees. You might be able to effectively, secure a fantastic or an integral person, a key talent for your business at almost a bargain price, because you're not having to pay the work from the office premium.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I mean, I would say to employers this, I would say that, look, really have a purpose for your office days, because if you don't have one, then what are you achieving just having, a bum on a seat, particularly in white collar professional roles? What is the point of having a bum on a seat and having no real purpose or cause for why that person is in that office? I mean, I hear this, probably the worst or the poorest argument for returning to the office is, I've got a nice office, I want to use it. Well, that's not a good reason. I think that if that's the only reason you're returning people to the office, well, then frankly, you should be downsizing and probably hot desking would be the situation there. I think if you're going to have an office day, it's got to be for a training or collaboration, or there may be a site reason why that's the case, but it should not be because you've got a nice office and you want to and you need to use it. I was reading some absolute rubbish in the media last week about the head of some landlords organisation saying, oh well, people are going to be returning to the office, otherwise they're going to be turned into, people's jobs are going to be replaced by robots. I mean, honestly, this sort of self-serving rubbish, I just think is a nonsense. And I just think employers have just got to be smart around, when do they ask people to come in, why, and just making the case to them as to the purpose for those particular days.
And just flowing on from there, and probably where I wanted to take the conversation next was around, let's say we're a business that wants to offer workplace flexibility. And I really want to hone in on that word flexibility. So should we be saying, hey, you can work from the office 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or whatever days it is, and 2 days you work from home? Or should it be true to the word in terms of the word flexibility? Should there be, some flexibility to adapt and change to employees' needs, as well as the changing needs of the business?
I think the business has to set the tone. I think that if you just leave it as an open slather, you can work from home as much as you want, you can come to the office when you want. I think that those situations always fail, because you're not giving any clarity. What you'll get in almost all circumstances where that happens, is that everyone will work from home. And basically, we've seen this from clients where they've left it up to the employees completely, and they've just all decided to work from home. So I'm not advocating that it's completely left up to the employees. I think you've got to take, obviously, certain needs into account. The three things I'd be factoring in are, number one, what are the collaboration needs of the teams and of the employees you have? Second of all, I think you've got to take a bit of a horses for courses approach, because you might have some people who are living in a small apartment with their partner, and it's only possible for one of them to work from home, and they might live really close to the office. Someone like that might come in 5 days a week. I would say that sort of profile of a person is the minority, not the majority. But there are people like that who want to come in all days and want to be around the city and that sort of stuff. So I think you need to have offices, obviously, for those reasons. So those sort of people also come into the mix. But I think overall, what I'd be doing is setting the tone for what the collaboration expectations are at a minimum. And then if people want to come to the office more than that, great. If they don't, well, then that would be the minimum requirement for working from the office. And it's about supervising and managing people better. And we'll probably get into that a little bit more later in the session. But I think setting the tone is the most important thing, and providing clear reasons and direction.
So let's not delay. Let's dive into that now. And the way I want to frame the question is, why do you really think that some businesses are scared to make workplace flexibility a permanent fixture within their business, and some of them are so desperate to return to the way things has always been done?
Well, I think I think the reality is, this is probably going to be, what I'm about to say is probably going to upset a few people, but I think a lot of people, the reality is that their managers are just not good enough at managing their staff. And I think that the situation is that if you need to see someone sitting, as I said, on a seat to determine whether or not that person is delivering the outcomes and results and objectives of the team, well, then your management approach needs to improve. And I think really where the shift needs to be is around, okay, what do I expect this role to deliver in terms of outcomes, in terms of objectives, in terms of work volume, and now manage that accordingly. And you need to be prepared to manage that from a remote perspective, or at least partially a remote perspective, because there's really no point in just having someone coming in so that you can see them sitting in the other corner of that office. That's not management and supervision. That's just, well, I've seen them there. And I guess the flip side of that is, what I have seen post-COVID is, I think a lot of employers now are getting better at this. They are getting better at identifying when people are not delivering their objectives and outcomes and work volume. Whereas in the past, if they were seen to be just coming into the office and just present, that was good enough for some employers, where I think now it's not good enough, because we've now in a new era where obviously presenteeism or being in a office space is not as much of a thing, with at least some workplace flexibility being out there. So it's really incumbent on those managers to now really drill deep at, well, work output, volume, results, and that's where I have seen a shift in the last, certainly in the last 2 years.
And I think the reality is there's an onus, in my view, on both the employer and the employee to grow, develop, and evolve to make this happen. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion around what's the positives, less travel time, etc. Why is it a benefit for the employer? Why is it a benefit for the employee? But in order to make it happen, the employer and the employee need to grow, evolve, and adapt. And where I'm talking about that is, on the one hand, as you've covered, the management style and shifting the expectations from outcomes delivered as opposed to hours worked. But the other side of that comes to the collaboration side, and the employee needs to grow and develop in the way in which they collaborate, being in a hybrid environment. But also the business needs to evolve in terms of the tools and systems and resources that they provide to their employees in order to facilitate this permanent change that we're saying is taking place. And I know here at On Demand HR, we've put a lot of focus in developing exactly these systems to be able to do exactly, we're practicing what we preach. So I think, both the employer and the employee need to work hand in hand in order to make this happen.
And I think some employers, just another point on that, I think some employers are probably more prepared for this than others. Some were already operating remotely prior to 2020, and obviously we're a great example of that. But there's many, many others that have done the same. So they've adapted quite well. Others, I mean, another poor excuse I hear for not having workplace flexibility is, oh, well, you know, our computer systems don't allow us to do it. I mean, honestly, those sort of arguments are just dead in 2022. I mean, if your systems are not capable of facilitating remote work, well, then, you know, it's just, I'd be having a look at your systems and how that is set up.
Fantastic. And
do you think that there's any direct or indirect cost that businesses will face if they push against, if they go the other way, if they try to force people back to the way things have already been done? Do you think they're going to face any direct or indirect costs?
I think it's just going to be a question of competition. So I think ultimately, if you are expecting people to attend offices more and there are other comparative roles where people are not expected to attend as often, well, then ultimately you need to pay more for that expectation, or ultimately your overall offering potentially could be less competitive. And we are seeing some of that already with clients that are adapting very well, are able to pick up additional employees. Ones that are not adapting as well, struggling to retain the people that they've got. So that, I think it's about understanding your industry as well. I mean, understanding what your general competitors are doing. And sometimes there's a lot of indirect competitors as well. But I think that the indirect cost will be that for those who don't adapt, I think they're really going to struggle in the next 1 to 2 years. I think that unemployment's going to remain low. I mean, even if it does rise a little bit, we're only talking probably into the 4s. So it's still going to be very high competition for people. And that's and look, there's been probably no better time to be looking for a job, a full-time job, than right now.
Yeah, I really
want to drill home around the indirect competitor side of things, because I think a lot of businesses really miss this when it comes to workplace flexibility. So if they're evaluating, hey, in order to retain or attract employees, I'm going to look at my direct competitor that does exactly the same thing that I do and see if they're doing it. If they're not doing it, I probably don't need to do it. And the reality is that's just not the case. You know, a person that does admin work for your direct competitor can do admin work in a whole myriad of other industries. So you need to look a little bit broader as to what other options are available to either your current employees from a retention perspective or a candidate that you're looking to attract to come and work and fill vacant positions within your business. So I think you need to be a little bit, I guess, more broader with your thinking when it comes to indirect competitors.
I think there's an even easier way of looking at this. I mean, yeah, sure, it's good to know what your competitors are doing, but I think the easiest way to look at this is to really say, okay, well, what are our collaboration needs in the office? What work can be done remotely, and trying to maximize the latter? Because if you could do that, well, then you're doing the best you can for workplace flexibility to put yourself in the best possible position to retain people. And sometimes I feel like people are kind of, they're almost trying to cook up, like some are doing like 3 and 2, for example, 3 days in the office, 2 days from home. And I'm not criticizing those situations, but it's often the case that even the ones that are doing 3 and 2, there's not 3 days worth of collaboration that's required. It might be a day and a half at best. So, I also encourage those employers to really look at that and go, well, is the 3 days really needed, or are we just trying to hang on to the past a bit? Are we just hanging on to that pre-2020 sort of stuff? So, yeah, look, again, people will evolve with this over time. I see the shift if anything, getting more rather than less, because I just think the pressure will mount on employers to deliver for people who are shopping around for different offers.
Fantastic. And
getting close to the end, but I think you kind of alluded that managers need to change and evolve and grow in their management style in order to adapt to, a remote workforce, or, in a workforce that's working remotely some of the time at least. And from a HR or workplace relations perspectives, what do you think are some of the processes that need to be in place in order to enable workplace flexibility, but still be able to effectively performance manage your workforce?
Yeah, I think there needs to be firstly clear structure around how work is to be carried out. So that's probably the main thing, and really being clear with people around what success looks like, what objectives each employee needs to meet. So for those businesses that have never, set objectives or never come up with performance plans, now's the time to be doing it, because otherwise, what are you measuring? What you're measuring hours? That's not a very good 2022 way of measuring work. So I think that, in the past, you'd sort of get away with it a bit more because people could be just sitting around in an office. You kind of have a general idea of what's happening. But now, because the expectations have changed, then, the management style needs to adapt, needs to be more clarity on what success, objectives, results looks like. And obviously, look, the other thing is making sure you've got all the practical tools to make remote work possible, making sure that your systems are adequate, making sure that your communications and you've got regular communication with your team and that being adequate, making sure that along with, supervising, there's also development of employees. That's probably one of the harder things to do remotely, is how do we develop our people? And, that's a challenging thing. And again, that's where the collaboration days can be used as a development opportunity, and certainly a planning opportunity as well. But those are just, in general terms, some of the things that I think are important for businesses and for management in adapting to these particular times.
So I think
We've kind of tackled this topic from a wide variety of angles throughout this session. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap up for today?
Not particularly, no. I just think that I would encourage, certainly followers of on-demand HR to be really embracing this change from a competition point of view. I don't want to get hung up on, work from home being the greatest thing ever, and I don't want to come across as being a massive, work from home advocate. I do believe there are people who struggle without direct supervision. I'll be the first to say that, we have seen this, but if they're struggling without direct supervision, well, then the supervision simply needs to improve and adapt to that particular person. And there just needs to be, different ways of managing those people. And I'm purely looking at it as a market perspective. And because on-demand HR not only does workplace relations, HR, recruitment, labour market analysis, we do all of these things. And I'm looking at this from a labour market recruitment perspective, but also retention, and saying, well, do this, because if you don't do this, you will fall behind in terms of your offering to people. And again, I'd say to employers, it's not an employer's market. You need to snap out of the mindset that there are heaps of people lining up to fill your job. That's the bottom line. So that was really all, Andrew. I think I just encourage clients to be open to workplace flexibility, or more open to it even in 2023 for those reasons.
fantastic. Thanks
So much for your time and insights, mate. I really appreciate it. And
Thanks,
today, before we draw the session to a close, as we promised a little bit earlier, there is a special announcement that we want to make of a new membership option from On-Demand HR that provides free online advice. So we put together a little bit of a video, so that's going to let you learn a little bit about it. And we're very much looking forward to seeing you all in the next session.
If you're watching this video, I'm going to have a guess that it's because your business is facing some kind of HR or workplace relations challenge. Well, I've got some good news. You're exactly the type of business that we created our free online support membership for. And it provides you with a high-level HR and workplace relations advice when you need it, as well as a whole heap of other benefits.
To learn more about what's included with free online support and to apply for membership, please visit ondemandhr.com.au/ online.